What's up, everybody? It's your guy, Ike Jones, and we are back here inside of the Auburn Express, brought to you by the War Report Podcast Network. And today we are going to be talking a little bit about Missouri football. Let's get into it. Yes, indeed, right here inside the Auburn Express, brought to you by the War Report Podcast Network, an affiliate of the Just a Sec podcast. Ike Jones in here with Quentin Corpuel. Oh my God, I just butchered your name. Ike Jones in here with Quentin Corpuel. Got it right that time. He is the football beat writer for Rock M Nation, and he is going to talk to us all things Missouri football today. Quentin, man, I appreciate your time. How are you doing today, first and foremost?
It's another day in paradise here in Columbia, Missouri. Another great day to talk about Mizzou football. I appreciate you having me on. I think, as you've probably read and seen a lot regarding Mizzou football, they have a lot to be excited about entering 2024, and Auburn is the homecoming game. So that will, I believe, actually, I don't want to make a certain statement that I don't know. If it's not sold out, it's pretty close.
I assume that Auburn travels well. So if it's not sold out now, it will be sold out by the time that game kicks off for sure.
Yeah, no, people are really excited. The homecoming game circled on the calendar every year at the University of Missouri, and they should get a pretty good fight from Auburn that has a lot of promise themselves. So I'm excited to talk about both teams here today.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Well, let's hop in here and talk first and foremost. Missouri football, good season last year. High expectations for this year. You've already talked about that. A lot of those high expectations center around what people expect from this offense this season, because you've got Brady Cook coming back after what most people would consider kind of a breakout year for him, right? Like, he was a little under the radar last year. Probably didn't have very high expectations. This season, though, people are seeing Brady Cook coming. What do you feel is going to be kind of the identity of this offense this season?
Fun, a lot of fun, a lot of electricity. Excuse me. I think people's expectations for the entire team last year, not just the offense, were pretty tempered coming off of a middling 2022 season. But when you looked at the offense, there was a lot to get excited about even before last season. Brady Cook, he is basically his throwing shoulder wasn't working properly for most of the season. The offensive line was underwhelming. The receivers struggled to get open. And the offense a couple of years ago, as people that watched the Mizzou Auburn game would probably know very well, was not very good, especially in that second half when it was almost all exclusively punts from both sides.
Yeah, that
s-
was that
and
was
so,
that was an absolutely abysmal game. Let's not talk about that too much. That game was awful.
yeah, no, that was definitely not a fun watch. But they exploded in 2023 for a multitude of reasons. One was that Brady Cook was healthy. Eli Drinkwitz handed over the offensive play calling duties to
Right.
Kirby Moore, and that proved to be a huge benefactor. The wide receivers, they all broke out. Luther Burden, the prince that was promised, exploded and is arguably a contender for the number one overall pick in next year's NFL draft. Theo Weiss, who came over from Oklahoma, established himself pretty quickly as the go-to red zone threat for Brady Cook, and a nice big body on the outside, something that Mizzou had been lacking in 2022. And then elsewhere, Mookie Cooper has been a steady veteran presence. And then they also got Marquise Johnson as the wide receiver 4, who is one of the fastest, if not the fastest receivers in all of college football. He averaged well over 20 yards a catch last season, which is pretty insane. And so he figures to be another important part of the rotation. And then Brady Cook, he set an SEC record for most consecutive pass attempts without an interception. Um, he was very safe with the ball. His pocket presence just looked a lot more confident. Broke out in that Kansas State game, and it was it was pretty crazy from a Mizzou perspective because Mizzou had underperformed in the first couple of games against South Dakota and Middle Tennessee State, the latter of which Mizzou almost lost. They
Right.
only beat the Blue Raiders by, I believe, 4 points, 23-19. And people had been pining for the backup Sam Horn to start for a very long time.
I
And
mean,
when we're,
that listen, I don't mean to cut you off, but that
no, go
actually
ahead.
was a thing going into media days
Hmm.
last year, was the conversation about whether or not Brady Cook was even going to be the starter. Like,
Yep.
Drinkwitz, people can say what they want to about him. The man is brutally honest, and he was honest at media days. He's like, I don't know. Is Brady ready? We'll see.
Yeah, no, and the players have been backing him the entire time. And before the Kansas State game, the Mizzou student section actually booed him when his name was called. And then Brady Cook goes out, has arguably the best game of his career, and Harrison Mevis puts the cherry on top of the 61-yard game-winning field goal. That game set the tone for the rest of the season, just like it
Right.
did in 2022, but in a more positive direction.
Right.
Um, and so, as you said, Ike, the offense is the biggest reason why people are super duper excited about Mizzou entering 2024. They have big shoes to fill in the backfield with Cody Schrader,
That was
now
going to be
departing
my
for the
next
NFL.
question. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah.
where do you go to replace the SEC's leading rusher?
Well, you go with what might be closer to a committee. Under Eli Drinkwitz, there has often been a bell cow back, whether it be somebody like Schrader, whether it be someone like Tyler Beatty. Um,
Right.
Oftentimes, it has been one running back taking most of the carries. This time around, I can also show you that's not going to be the case. Nate Noel, the transfer from Appalachian State, is listed on the unofficial depth chart as the running back one, with Marcus Carroll, the transfer from Georgia State, listed as the RB2. I would not expect the split in carries to be something like 95-5 or
Mm,
even 85-15. Both backs are very, very capable. Marcus Carroll took only two fewer carries than Schrader did last season. He was
mm,
Georgia State's bell cow. He's a bigger back. Yesterday, reporters got a chance to talk to him, and I had asked him what running backs he watches that he takes things from and puts into his own game. He said Marshawn Lynch because he
mm.
said he likes, I don't want to say verbatim, but he said he likes running through people's face. So
Yeah.
that's the kind of back he is. And then Nate Noel, he said he takes a lot from Duke Johnson, especially because both of them are from Miami. But he's more of a lightning. He's a little skinnier, but he's got more speed, more quickness. Was a little bit more of a lightning if you want to call Marcus Carroll a thunder. So I would expect them two to share most of the workload, and then behind them, you got a few promising underclassmen in Jamal Roberts, Kewan Lacey, and Tavoris Jones.
Okay. Okay. So definitely to this point doesn't appear as if there's going to be one guy that emerges from that, but got a little change of pace in the two types of backs that are at the top of that depth chart. When you look at the offense, of course, again, you've run down the list of wide receivers that are out there. Of course, headlined by Luther Burden, who is phenomenal, and I expect to have one of the best wide receiver seasons in the SEC this season. But it's all going to start about how are they going to perform up front on the offensive line? And does Missouri have that continuity coming back this season that's going to allow them to really then just worry about, okay, let's get the playmakers out there and be involved?
Yeah, so the offensive line should contend for the Joe Moore Award once again. The center comes back, Connor Towson. The whole right side of the offensive line comes back in right guard Cameron Johnson and right tackle Armand Membu, who for the second year in a row made Bruce Feldman's freaks list from the Athletic. The left side of the offensive line, which was where most of the questions lay, after Javon Foster, the left tackle, and Xavier Delgado, the left guard, both program cornerstones, had been there for a long time and committed to Mizzou well before uh, the program started going in that direction. They departed. Javon Foster got drafted, and Xavier Delgado also graduated. They got two pretty effing good replacements, I will say. Left tackle, they scored Marcus Bryant out of SMU. Big body, has taken over 2,000 collegiate snaps at left tackle. Was one of the best left tackles in the American Athletic Conference. And then a left guard before they got Bryant, they pillaged Caden Green away,
Mm,
Kansas City product from Oklahoma. Um, Before they had landed Bryant, it looked like he might have been the favorite to take over that left tackle spot, but Cannon Green is going to slot into left guard. And that's a pretty lethal 1-2 punch, especially because Foster and Delgado had been so good protecting Brady Cook's blind side and running outside zone, which was a staple within Kirby Moore's offense. Javon Foster and Xavier Delgado were exceptional at getting to the second level and paving the way for Cody Schrader. I think Bryant and Caden Green can both do that at a very high level. And so, if there were any two guys in the portal that Mizzou could have gotten to feel as safe as possible about protecting Brady Cook's blind side and paving holes for guys like Nate Noel and Marcus Carroll, Marcus Bryant and Caden Green are, I would say, probably the two best guys they could have gotten to fill those roles.
yeah. So listen, this was never going to be a question in my mind. Missouri's going to have a good offense again this year.
Mm-hmm.
The only reason that changes is, God forbid, because I never wish for this, is going to be injury. That any of that stuff kind of dissipates into some 2022 and before version of Missouri football. So I am definitely looking forward to seeing what Missouri can do on the offensive side of the ball. We're in here on the Auburn Express talking a little bit with the guy from Rock M Nation, Quentin Corpuel. And I'm going to butcher your name every single time, right around that third syllable for whatever reason. But I'm sure you're used to people doing that, and I apologize. It's not intentional. But football beat writer there for Rock M Nation, and let's pivot and talk about the other side of the football, right? And I mean, we might even throw a little special. Actually, you know what? Before we get to the defense, special teams, because Mevis has been, up and down, right? But now you got to figure like what's happening there with the special team situation at Missouri.
Yeah, so turnover at kicker. Harrison Mevis, the thicker kicker, graduated to the NFL, was signed as UDFA from the Carolina Panthers. Unfortunately for him, he got cut. So hopefully he's able to find a home at the professional level, whether that be the NFL or even somewhere like the UFL. But yeah, Harrison Mevis, big shoes to fill, was captain clutch, came up so huge for Mizzou in crunch time moments dating back to even 2020 when he gave Mizzou a 50-48 victory over Arkansas in what was a completely insane game in Columbia. Last year, obviously, had the 61-yarder, but he also had a big-time chip shot against Florida that sealed Mizzou. There's Mizzou's hopes, at least, of going to the New Year's Six Bowl. And even though he, for example, missed a chip shot game winner against Auburn a couple of years ago that would have won the game,
He
he
came
was
back
at his
literally. What was it? The next week, then he hit a
the
game
next
winner.
week,
Like, yeah,
5 for 5 against Georgia, almost single-handedly kept Mizzou in the game. That
yeah,
included a couple of 50-plus yarders. And so the guy that will be next up, it's going to be Blake Craig. He's been with Mizzou for a year. He's at a Liberty High School, a Missouri native. Was a little inconsistent his senior year at Liberty. I believe he went 17 of 24 on field goals, but had a couple of 50-plus yarders to his name and performed pretty well in the spring and the fall. I believe in Mizzou's most recent scrimmage, he went 6 for 7. His only miss was from, I think, 51 yards. So I think expecting him to pick off right where Mevis left off, I think, is an unreasonable expectation. Yes, it is super nice to have not only a reliable kicker, but one that can hit from 60-plus yards.
right,
Is Can Blake Craig do that consistently at the collegiate level? TBD. We'll
right,
see. But yeah, that's definitely a position to look out for. And then at punter, it looks like it's going to be Luke Bauer coming back to start again for Mizzou. He had split time last year, but it's funny. His best highlight was actually not a punt; it was a throw that he made against Kentucky that completely swung the game. It was, oh God, it was around a 40 or 50-yard passing touchdown on a fake punt to Marquise Johnson. Completely swung the Kentucky game. They had been down 14-0. If they punt and Kentucky goes down and score, that's a 3-touchdown lead in the first half.
right,
But that play completely swung the game. Luke Bauer, pretty good punter, was facing some competition externally from Orion Phillips, transferred from Murray State out of Australia's Pro Kick Academy. Obviously, that pipeline is super duper strong with not just guys in college, but the NFL as well.
right,
But it looks like it's going to be Luke Bauer taking punts. And then kick and punt returns, that have been a battle all off season. Those are still pretty malleable positions, even though Luther Burden is currently listed as the lead punt returner. He had been subbed out last year for Chris Abrams-Drain. The hope was that Burden was going to fix Mizzou's sort of return issues. Eli Drinkwitz calling in camp trash yards, which were basically yards lost due to not being able to catch a punt properly. Luther
right,
Burden had some of those struggles last season, and that's why Chris Abrams-Drain took that role. Even if he wasn't a prolific returner, he was able to catch punts and eliminate those trash yards. So the hope is that Burden can pick that up and return to his high school ways where he was an elite punt returner. And then kick returner, Marquise Johnson is going to be the main kick returner. I believe Mizzou over the last decade plus has finished in the bottom half of both kick and punt return yards. So hopefully for them, that'll increase this year, and they definitely have the personnel to do it.
okay, okay, all right. Well, I again, not everybody's favorite topic to hear about, but it definitely is an important part of the game, as we are well witness to. Auburn special teams has kind of been needed to make sure that we can secure victories over here the way the offense had been performing the last few seasons. But let's pivot and talk about the this is the unit that I have the biggest questions about, and I think a lot of people have questions about. You lose the defensive coordinator, you lose a few key pieces along that defensive secondary and along the defensive front. What is Missouri's defense going to look like this year? Which, in my opinion, that was the catapult of really the ascension of Missouri football. Was the defense started being able to get stops consistently and make it difficult for teams to run the football consistently. How's Missouri looking on defense this year?
Yeah, and as you said, in 2022 and 2023 under Blake Baker, that was a huge strength, especially in 2022 when the offense really failed to produce. It was the defense that was keeping them in games like Georgia, like Auburn. Um, and so Blake Baker obviously leaving for the same position at LSU. I think structurally, Mizzou's defense is going to look pretty similar under former South Alabama defensive coordinator Corey Batoon. Loves to attack, loves to get downhill, loves to get after the quarterback. Um, that's why he brought over, or I guess not himself personally, but that's why a guy like Khalil Jacobs, the linebacker who had worked with Corey Batoon for the past couple of years at South Alabama, he's very similar to Tyron Hopper, who has since
Mm,
departed to the NFL.
right.
Elite sideline to sideline lateral ability, can get downhill, especially in packages like Prowler, which I'll shout out Eli Hoff from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, did a great job of explaining the Prowler package. Basically, in a 4-2-5 defensive alignment, four defensive linemen, two linebackers, five defensive backs. In third down situations where Mizzou is in an advantageous spot, they'll sub out a linebacker for an extra defensive back, and the lone linebacker, is hopefully going to be able to patrol the middle of the field super well. And Khalil Jacobs was in a practice, at least, that Mizzou beat writers were able to view. Khalil Jacobs was that guy. He
Hmm.
was that one on I guess, the 4-1-6 formation. Um, and so it should look similar structurally. The defensive backs, obviously, you lose a lot with the two starting corners, Chris Abrams-Drain and Ennis Rakestraw, also departing for the NFL. The guys that are stepping up are very similar stylistically in Drayden Norwood and Toriano Pride Jr., who's a transfer from Clemson. Both physical guys, especially Drayden Norwood. Saw it a handful of times of him in a reserve role last season. Very willing tackler. Obviously, the main goal of a cornerback is to be able to guard a receiver one-on-one, but they are willing to get their hands dirty, especially in the run game. And so Mizzou should be feeling pretty good about themselves there. On the back end, especially in the star position, you got guys like Dalen Carnell, who's a returner, loves to blow stuff up everywhere on the field. And then elsewhere, you got guys like Trevez Johnson, Sidney Williams, Joseph Charleston in the safety spots, who are all very familiar with Mizzou. And then along the defensive line, you obviously lose a guy like Darius Robinson, and a lot of the interior players that made D-line Zoo so strong was just the amount of guys that they could rotate in and out, and you wouldn't really lose a step. A lot of those guys are gone. Um, and especially with a guy like Darius Smith, a transfer from Georgia, going down for the season a little while ago, who was set to play that joker role of a outside lineman who could also drop back into coverage. That was definitely a big loss. But they also have a lot of very solid contributors. Johnny Walker Jr. on the edge uh, has proven to be the alpha, both emotionally and with his performance throughout the spring and the fall. And then on the interior, a guy I'd be looking out for is Christian Williams. Definitely one of the older guys in the team, has been playing college football for a while, but he's, I believe, the lone returner on the interior for Mizzou. And then finally, at the linebacker spot, you lose a lot with Chad Bailey, and as I mentioned before, Tyron Hopper, guy stepping up into those spots, Jacobs, and the other two that should be getting a lot of playing time, Tristan Newson and Chuck Hicks, who have both been playing a lot of college football themselves. So the continuity is actually a lot greater than one might have thought with
Mm.
all of the NFL talent that Mizzou lost over the offseason. And it's understandable that there are way more question marks on that side of the ball than the offense. But I think Mizzou shouldn't lose too much from last year. Um, but that'll definitely be the biggest unknown heading into this season.
Um, but yeah, and again, the weirdness of the UMass game brings you into a situation where you're traveling back home, as you already stated, your homecoming game versus the Auburn Tigers there in Como. And cut listen, it's an Auburn podcast, but I want you to cut it straight with me. How do you all feel about that game sitting on the schedule coming off the road versus Auburn?
Sneaky difficult. And again, I'm not just saying that because I'm staring an Auburn guy directly in the eyes. Um, but I'm saying if people think that Mizzou is going to go 8-4, 9-3, lose somewhere outside of Alabama, Oklahoma, Texas A&M, Auburn's been the one that I've seen is the most cited as Mizzou could potentially lose that game. I don't know how extensive you want to go into Auburn here on this podcast, but I'd love to ask you like a couple of things
Yeah, talk to
from
me.
an Auburn guy. What is the true hype level of the wide receiver room? Because
Uh,
it is obviously more exciting than years
it's
past.
obnoxious levels of hype at this point
Okay,
in time. It's
okay, good to
obnoxious
know.
levels. Yeah.
Okay, good to know. Because obviously on paper it is far better than the last couple of seasons. I don't need to remind you, for example, how difficult it's been watching Auburn over the air. And you figured with Hugh Freeze, who had worked some magic at Ole Miss and Liberty, that the passing attack can improve, especially with a guy like Peyton Thorne, who experienced a lot of success in Michigan State before coming over to Auburn. But I have a very hard time believing that Auburn isn't going to drastically improve over the air. How is everyone down in Alabama feeling about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a mixed bag because it's still you have the memory of what Peyton Thorne looked like last year as the quarterback, right? And I
Hmm.
actually, I haven't made this comparison a lot on shows or publicly, so but like I actually um compare it a little bit to Brady Cook, and minus the injury situation, they're very similar quarterbacks, right? Like they're sneaky athletic and sometimes prone to throw bad picks, but if you give them time and they have a good run game, they can be surgical, right? Like they can, and you have your Luther Burden style, like the hype that Missouri fans had that freshman season for Luther Burden. That I won't say it was underwhelming early in the season. People were talking about how he wasn't getting his touches, all this kind of stuff, and then the next year he goes from like what 70 catches to 100 and so like it's ridiculous the jump that he made year over year.
Hmm.
But you have a very similar Luther Burden-esque type of buzz, but it's about 3 to 4 guys,
Yep.
which is again, it's gotten to be obnoxious levels of we've got the best young wide receiver core in the SEC types of rumblings that you're hearing out of Auburn circles, which I'm gonna be honest, I'm not immune to booging out a little bit about my team, and I'm believing the hype a little bit in these. Like they're just athletic. They've got speed. They've got size. Like Perry Thompson should be able to move that quickly at 212 pounds, six whatever he is, 6'3". Like it's just not supposed to happen. Cam Coleman put on some extra weight. He's in the 209. Like and he still can run a 4.5, 4.4. Like that. Just not. You're not supposed to be able to do that, right? And so with all of that happening, and Peyton Thorne, it doesn't have to be great. Just got to be all right. And you're throwing to a bunch of guys that can go make it happen. It's got a lot of people cautiously optimistic. I'll use cautious optimism about where this pass game could potentially go this year.
Okay, good to know. I mean, on paper, like I wrote the Auburn preview for our Rock and Preview magazine. Um, that was awesome, and I think if any of you all watching this podcast or listening to it on whatever platform would love to check out, I'd be happy to send it over to Ike, and I can
Yeah,
send it
we'll
over to
link it
you
in
all.
the description of the
Okay,
video and in the podcast. We got you.
awesome. Apologies for the shameless plug, but we
It's all
worked,
right. It's what
you
we're
know,
here for. That's what we're
yeah,
here for.
we worked very hard on that, and we are very proud of the product. But in that Auburn preview, I was looking at the receivers. I'm like, wow, there's a lot that defenses are going to have to deal with. Whether it's a
Yeah,
guy like Cam Coleman, Auburn got a couple of really awesome transfers in Keandre Lambert Smith
Lambert Smith.
and
Yep.
Robert Lewis as well. And then Peyton Thorne, who should hopefully be 100%, knock on wood, for the entire season for Auburn's sake. Um, his biggest job is going to be to distribute.
Yeah.
And its life is a lot easier, especially coming from here covering a team where life was a lot easier for Brady Cook when guys were actually open and he had time to throw. I would expect something similar for Auburn this coming year, and especially against a Mizzou secondary that, again, while they have a lot of promising guys, whether it's returners, transfers, or young guys, um, that's going to be a lot to deal with.
Yeah.
And so I'm very intrigued for the wide receiver defensive back matchup between Auburn and Mizzou.
Yeah, I think that that's for me. I mean, wide receiver DB is always going to be a focal point, but it's going to be really who controls the line of scrimmage, like it is for most things. Like,
Yep.
is the Missouri defensive line going to be able to make it difficult for Peyton Thorne to have time to get the ball to these receivers that are out there? Because I mean, hey, listen, you could have 5 Randy Mosses lined up out there in a zero package, and if he doesn't have time to throw the ball, it doesn't matter. Like it's just
Yep.
it's irrelevant as to what you kind of put together out there. Um, so I'm very interested in this game in particular because I do think it's an opportunity. Similar to how I said for you all with the Texas A&M game, this is a barometer game. I think Oklahoma is the game within the season that kind of determines whether you get to the over or the under. But Missouri is more of your barometer game for me because it's your second road test. You go on the road to Georgia, but you get a bye week. You get an opportunity to reset. Hopefully, you're not licking your wounds too bad from getting spanked in Athens, because I do think that Georgia is still ridiculously good this season, and I don't envision a way that Auburn wins that game. But
You could have said that before the game last season, and they gave him a pretty
it
good fight.
if it were at home, I would repeat that. I need to see. For me, road Peyton Thorne has not been impressive against any team with a pulse.
Okay.
The only games that he played well on the road last season were Vanderbilt and Arkansas, and both of them basically laid down um, a quarter and a half into the game, right? And so I need to see him on the road versus a quality opponent, and then I'll start to believe. So how he plays in that Georgia game, win or lose, is going to tell me a lot about whether or not Auburn can actually get the Missouri game. Because again, you're coming off of a bye week after that, and you're gonna have that means that Coach Hugh Freeze will have a whole additional week to game plan. How are we going to attack this Missouri defense? DJ Durkin will have an entire week to figure out how do we stop this high-powered Missouri offense. That's the one that you sneak, in my opinion. If you're Auburn, you got to hope that if you're going to sneak a road game, that's the one, because you
Yep.
got all this extra time to prep for it. And Missouri's coming off of a road trip from Massachusetts the week before, right? And so,
Hmm.
but it is UMass, so I don't know how much actual game prep and planning they're going to be doing for UMass going up there. Probably running as much base offense as they can and get guys off the field and let the backups get in there. But still, it is travel, so and it's a little bit different for those two guys coming from different perspectives of that. So we'll see what happens. But that's the one, in my opinion. If you're Auburn, okay, you're circling that and say, all right, we got to get this one if we're going to get a road game this year. But yeah. Anyway, it's going to be an interesting road. But I don't know. Have you guys put out any projections of where you think this team lands as far as the number is concerned? Like we don't necessarily put out like a number. We kind of give like a general range, floor, ceiling type of stuff. What's your gut feeling about Missouri overall this season?
I think 10 wins is very attainable. The
Mhm.
expectation is to make the college football playoff. I think if they fall short of the college football playoff, I don't think the general Mizzou public is going to be super happy. Um, this feels like, at least right now, this feels like the start of 2008. Not like I was knowing where I was most of the time. I was 4 years old when that season started. But Mizzou enters that season coming off a surprisingly awesome 2007 season where they win 12 games, including a dominant Cotton Bowl victory. They're one win away from the national championship. They were ranked number one. They come in 2008 being ranked sixth. Um, and that season, they go, I believe they went 10-3. 10 wins is awesome. Like 10
Right.
wins is great. But I think with what Mizzou can very easily accomplish, I'm not sure going 9-3, then beating Iowa in the Citrus Bowl. Not sure people are going to be 100% satisfied. I think they'll be happy that the standard has been raised. Like back-to-back 10-win seasons is great. Not a lot of college football programs, especially at the power conference level, can say they did that. Um, but I think with what Missouri can accomplish, especially because they win 11 games last season, this season they have on paper an easier schedule. Uh, a college football playoff appearance is, hold on, right there. I wanted to palm the light like it was the sun. Um, so I hope that worked at least a little bit. But yeah, I think people expect Mizzou to make the college football playoff.
Yeah, I mean, I think, when I look at, and I'm going to be honest, I did pick Missouri if I'm looking at teams that I feel like are going to fall below what the overarching expectation is. Missouri is one of those teams where I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if they're going to be able to live up to the hype that they have this season. Um, that it was between you all and Ole Miss, if we're going to be honest. Like it's like one of these two teams that is predicted to win 10 or 11 games this season is going to fall woefully short. And I think Ole Miss has the easier path to get there because Ole Miss it's not an Ole Miss pod today, but they've got a cream puff of a schedule
No,
out there.
that's look, that's okay, and that's completely understandable for all the reasons we've already talked about.
Yeah,
And so, like, and especially with the structure of the college football playoff, there's a really good chance that two of those conference champions from the Power Four are not actually top four teams, and
true.
namely the ACC probably, and the Big 12 more likely. Like, there's a very good chance the Big 12 champion has three losses. There's a very good chance that the ACC champion has two losses. That basically cuts out an at-large bid. And so I think Mizzou would have to finish like, or if you want an at-large bid, you have to finish in the top 10 of the AP poll in order to contend for one of those at-large bids. So it's going to be difficult, and I totally understand. I don't want you to think you're offending anybody here when you're saying that, because it is
Listen,
not
we're,
as
we're
easy
here
of
to be
a
honest,
road as
man.
possible.
Yeah, we're here to be honest. There's no reason to hide behind takes that I've already put out there. So yeah, we'll definitely see what happens. I am unfortunately not going to get an opportunity to make the trip to Como this year. I wish I could, but it's a little too far for me to be venturing out there. But it's one of the few places I have not been yet in the SEC. I'm hopefully gonna, now that the new formatting of rotations happening. Hopefully, I'll get an opportunity here coming up soon, though.
Yeah, no, it's a great town, and hopefully I'll be in Auburn next year when the zoo travels down there.
I'm looking forward to it. Looking forward to it. All right, let's get out of here. Time is far spent. Before you get out of here, Quentin, let people know where they can check out all the great stuff that you all are doing over at your situation. Excuse me, for Missouri athletics. It's not just football, of course, but you are the football beat writer. But let them know where they can keep up with you.
Yeah, rockmnation.com, the SB Nation affiliate for the Zoo Athletics. I think we do an excellent job of not just covering the revenue sports of football and men's basketball, the non-revenue sports, or we like to call it Olympic sports. I think that's a better term. The coverage of there is top notch, and I really don't know who else is doing it better than we are at Rock M Nation. So that team is awesome. Um, and obviously the football side is excellent. I'm really excited with for this season with my buddy Dean Rao, who is also taking the same position. So hopefully we're going to be a pretty lethal 1-2 punch there on the beat. Super excited for the opportunity, and you can follow me on socials at my full name spelled out. If you're watching this with your eyes, you can see it right below my name at Quentin Corpuel, QUENTIN CORPUEL. This was fantastic, Ike. I appreciate you having me on. And yeah, best of luck with whatever other preview stuff you got going on.
Yeah, hopefully we can get you back on here the week of the game so we can talk a
Yeah,
little bit more because we'll have a better picture of what these teams are going to look like by the time that week 8 matchup happens. But we're going to get out of here. You guys know who we are. We are the War Report. I am at TWR Ike Jones on all social media. Make sure that you like this video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you're listening on podcast, go ahead and give us that 5-star review. Share all the content out there wherever you are listening. But until the next time, and as always, we're out of here. Peace.